The silence in this place weighs heavier than rain. I've been carrying it for 6 months now, ever since I came to help with the flood recovery and never left. My name is Dr. Eliza Maris, and I should have returned to the city by now. Should have gone back to my life, my practice, my apartment that still smells like my sister's perfume even though she's been gone for over a year. But something keeps me here in this forgotten corner of the world, where the trees grow too close together and the fog never quite lifts. Maybe it's because grief finds its own geography. Maybe it's because some losses are too vast for city streets. The first time I saw him, I thought he was a shadow that had learned to breathe. Just a gray shape curled beside an old moss-covered rock at the edge of the forest. So still he could have been part of the earth itself. Rain had been falling for days, turning everything soft and mournful, and yet there he was, unchanged, unmoved, like he was waiting for something that might never come. Before I go deeper into this story, can you tell me in the comments where you're watching from? I'd love to know your country and your city. Sometimes I wonder if the loneliness I felt that first morning is the same kind of loneliness that exists everywhere, in every corner of the world. I watched him for 3 weeks before I worked up the courage to approach. Every morning, driving past on my way to the temporary clinic we'd set up in the old firehouse, I'd see that same gray figure, same position, same terrible stillness. The local volunteers said he'd been there since before the flood, maybe longer. No one seemed to know where he'd come from, and after a while, they stopped seeing him altogether. He became part of the landscape, like the rock he never left. But I kept seeing him. I couldn't stop. On the third Tuesday, when the rain had finally gentled to mist, I parked my truck and walked across the wet grass. My boots made soft, squelching sounds that seemed too loud in the morning quiet. He didn't run when I approached. Didn't even lift his head. Only when I reached out my hand did his body flinch violently, like he'd been struck by lightning. Then he went perfectly still again, as if movement itself was dangerous. His eyes were the color of old paper, yellowed and tired. There was something ancient in his gaze, something that made my chest tighten with recognition. I'd seen that look before, in my own reflection during those first months after Sarah disappeared. The look of someone who's learned that hope can be more painful than despair. I carried him back to my truck, his body limp and surprisingly light in my arms. He didn't struggle, didn't protest, just let himself be lifted away from that rock like he'd been waiting for permission to leave. My heart was pounding, though I couldn't say why. Something about the way he surrendered felt both heartbreaking and terrifying. At the clinic, I set him up in the back room with food, water, and a soft bed. He wouldn't touch any of it. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, wouldn't sleep. His breathing was shallow but steady, like he was conserving something precious. I named him Ash, for the way his gray fur looked like the remains of something that had once burned bright. The volunteers who helped at the clinic tried to engage with him, but Ash existed in his own careful bubble of silence. He didn't respond to commands or affection, didn't react to loud noises or the chaos of other animals being brought in. But I noticed things, small things. He avoided the mirror in the examination room, turning his head away whenever he caught sight of his reflection. He cowered at the sound of zippers being pulled, and he refused to cross certain thresholds in the building, stopping abruptly as if there were invisible barriers only he could see. At first, I thought it was trauma. We see it all the time in rescue animals. But this felt different. His silence wasn't fear. It was calculation. At night, when I worked late updating medical records, I'd find him sitting upright in the corner, eyes fixed on the door, ears trained for sounds that never came. Or maybe sounds that only he could hear. But why did I flinch when I said his name that first time? 2 weeks passed before I discovered the scars. I was giving him a gentle bath, hoping the warm water might ease some of the tension he carried in his small frame, when my fingers found them. Thin, symmetrical lines along his abdomen. Too precise to be from fights with other animals. Too clean to be accidental. They felt deliberate, purposeful, like someone had taken great care in their placement. Behind his right ear, hidden beneath matted fur, was a small raised bump under the skin. I shaved the area carefully, my hands trembling slightly as I worked. The bump was hard, metallic, foreign, something that definitely didn't belong inside a living creature. I scheduled an X-ray for the following morning, though part of me dreaded what we might find. That night, I dreamed of Sarah standing in a clearing surrounded by dark trees. Her eyes were hollow, her voice echoing strangely when she spoke. "It wasn't just me," she said over and over. "It wasn't just me." I woke with tears on my cheeks and the absolute certainty that something was watching me from the corner of the room. But when I turned on the light, there was only Ash, sitting in his usual position, staring at the door. And if stories like this move your heart the way they move mine, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of these journeys. Because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about the world. 2 days later, a man came to the clinic. He didn't knock or announce himself, just appeared in the doorway like he'd been expected. Middle-aged, wearing clothes that were expensive but unremarkable. The kind of person you'd forget the moment he left the room. He didn't introduce himself or explain why he was there. Just asked, in a voice as flat as still water, if anyone had brought in a dog who doesn't belong. The way he phrased it made my skin crawl. Not a lost dog or a stray. A dog who doesn't belong. As if belonging was something that could be measured, categorized, controlled. He described Ash perfectly. The gray fur, the size, even the way he held himself with that careful, watchful stillness. But here's what made my blood run cold. He referred to Ash in the past tense, as if he were no longer alive, as if he were already gone. I said nothing. Something deep in my gut told me that silence was safety, that words would be a betrayal I couldn't take back. The man studied my face for a long moment, then smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone accustomed to silence, someone who expected resistance and found it amusing. He left without giving his name or asking any follow-up questions. I watched from the window as he walked to a dark sedan with no license plate visible. The car pulled away slowly, almost leisurely, like there was no hurry. Like they knew exactly where to find what they were looking for when the time was right. From that day forward, everything changed. Ash began pacing every night at exactly 3:13 a.m. Not anxiously, but methodically, like he was following an invisible patrol route. He would bark at corners where nothing stood, his voice sharp and urgent. The fluorescent lights in the clinic started flickering whenever he walked beneath them, casting strange shadows that moved independently of his body. Our security camera footage began showing digital artifacts whenever Ash appeared in frame. Streaks of light, patches of static, shapes that shouldn't exist. Sometimes I'd find him staring at the supply closet, his whole body trembling. Once, I swear I heard whispers coming from inside it, soft voices speaking words I couldn't quite understand. When I opened the door, there was nothing but medical supplies and the smell of disinfectant. But Ash refused to come within 10 feet of that closet for the rest of his time at the clinic. The most disturbing thing, though, was when I tried to take him for a walk. The moment we stepped outside, he pulled frantically toward the forest. Not the gentle pulling of a dog who wants to explore, but the desperate urgency of someone returning to a post they should never have left. He pulled me all the way back to that moss-covered rock where I'd first found him. I knew then that I had to look underneath. That night, I returned alone with a flashlight and gardening gloves. Ash had followed me to the edge of the forest but refused to come any closer, whimpering low in his throat, his eyes wide with something that looked like grief. The rock was larger than I'd realized, partially embedded in the earth like it had been there for decades. But when I examined it more closely, I could see that it had been moved. Recently, I began digging through wet leaves and soft earth, my flashlight casting dancing shadows between the trees. My fingers found fabric first, something pink and synthetic that didn't belong in the forest floor. Then plastic, crinkled and yellowed with age. Then something harder, a small backpack, child-sized. And beneath it, wrapped in deteriorating plastic, the unmistakable shape of human remains. My hands shook as I brushed dirt away from a decomposed jacket. There, Stitched into the collar in faded blue thread was a name: Nora. Nora Williamson, the 8-year-old girl who had gone missing 4 years ago. The case that had consumed the local police for months before being quietly closed, the family moving away shortly after. Presumed dead. No leads. No hope. I sat back on my heels, staring at what I'd uncovered, and watched as Ash finally approached. He crawled carefully to the edge of the shallow grave, and for the first time since I'd known him, lay fully on his side. His body relaxed completely, his breathing deepened, and he slept. The horror of it wasn't just the discovery of a child's remains, it was the quiet horror of recognition, the way Ash had mourned this place, guarded it, waited beside it with the patience of someone who understood exactly what lay beneath, as if he'd been assigned to keep watch, as if he'd known exactly who was buried there. If you're feeling this moment the way I did when it happened, please leave a like and share your feelings in the comments. It means more than you know, because what I discovered next will stay with me for the rest of my life. From that night forward, Ash began to change. Slowly, carefully, like someone learning to trust again. He started eating small meals, accepting water, allowing me to touch his face without flinching. Once, when I was sitting beside his crate and whispered Sarah's name aloud, something I hadn't done since she disappeared, he walked over and gently licked my hand. The gesture was so tender, so deliberate, that I started crying and couldn't stop. I began sleeping on a cot beside his crate, not out of professional duty, but out of need. He was the only living thing who seemed to understand the weight I carried, the way grief could make you feel responsible for things beyond your control. But as Ash healed, other things became clear. The metallic object I'd found behind his ear sometimes emitted a soft humming sound at night, like a device receiving signals from far away. Doors I'd locked would be found open in the morning. My phone camera started malfunctioning whenever I tried to photograph him, capturing only static and distorted images, and I began noticing shadows at the edge of the forest. Not animal shadows, human shapes, standing just beyond the tree line, watching. The night everything came to a head, we lost power during another heavy rainstorm. I lit a candle and settled in to wait for the generator to kick in, but Ash suddenly stood alert, every muscle in his body tense. Outside, a cold white light was moving slowly through the trees. Too bright to be a flashlight, too slow to be a drone. It moved with an almost sentient quality, searching, probing, getting closer to the clinic with each pass. The hair on my arms stood up. My breath came in short gasps. And then, cutting through the sound of rain and wind, came a single deliberate knock at the back door. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat perfectly still while that measured knocking continued. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. Like a code, like a signal, like someone expected to be let in. I never opened that door. In the weeks that followed, I began to understand that Ash wasn't just a stray dog who'd wandered into my life. He had purpose, memory, maybe even some kind of programming I couldn't begin to comprehend. He hadn't stumbled upon Nora's grave by accident. He'd been bound to it by something deeper than training, older than understanding. I started researching other missing children in the area, other unexplained disappearances, other dogs found in impossible circumstances, displaying behavior that didn't fit any known patterns. Slowly, connections began forming, dates that aligned, symbols that repeated. A network of something I couldn't name but could feel growing around us like a web. Ash stays close to me now, never leaves my side. When I pray, something I hadn't done since Sarah vanished, he listens with the attention of someone who understands the weight of words spoken to the infinite. There's one night I'll never forget. I was sitting on the floor of the clinic after hours, overwhelmed by everything I'd discovered, everything I couldn't prove or explain. Ash walked over and pressed his paw against my chest, right over my heart. He looked directly into my eyes and let out a single, soft breath, like he was releasing a burden he'd carried too long, like he was trusting me with something sacred. In that moment, I felt Sarah's presence so strongly, it was like she was sitting beside me. Not the hollow-eyed figure from my dreams, but my sister, as she really was. Laughing, stubborn, brave enough to hike alone into mountains that would ultimately swallow her whole. And I understood something I'd been refusing to see. Maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved completely. Maybe some truths are too vast for any one person to carry. Maybe the healing comes not from finding all the answers, but from learning to hold space for the questions, to guard the memory of those who can't speak for themselves. Yesterday, another child went missing 2 towns over. An 11-year-old boy named Marcus who disappeared while walking home from school. The police are calling it a runaway case, but the details feel familiar. Too familiar. And according to witnesses, there was a dog watching from across the street when Marcus vanished. A gray dog, sitting perfectly still, like he was waiting for something. Some connections run deeper than we can imagine. Some purposes transcend the boundaries between species, between the living and the lost. I don't know if I was meant to save Ash or if he was sent to save me, but I know that we're bound together now by something that can't be broken, something that requires us to keep watching, keep listening, keep bearing witness to the truths that others refuse to see. The forest keeps its secrets, but it also keeps its guardians. And sometimes if you're quiet enough, brave enough, broken enough to see clearly, you realize that you've become one of them. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. If it touched you, please subscribe, leave your comment below, and know how grateful I am for having you here. Because this isn't really an ending. It's just the beginning of understanding how much we don't know, and how much love it takes to keep searching anyway.